Okay, let's talk about it. It is the absolute beast of A-level politics paper 3, the 30-mark essay. I know, the pressure is real. But what if I told you there's a clear, repeatable formula to not just survive it, but to completely and utterly master it? Well, today, we are cracking that code.
Right. So in section C, you've got to answer two of these monsters. That's a massive part of your final grade, just writing on two essays. But look, don't panic. The key here isn't just knowing your stuff. It's about knowing the game you're playing. And that is exactly what we are going to break down, step by step.
So here's our roadmap for this. First, we'll dive into what the examiners are really looking for. Then, we're going to build the perfect paragraph from the ground up, lay out a winning game plan for exam day, and finally, we'll cover the common traps that cost students marks so you can just sidestep them completely.
All right, first things first. Let's stop thinking of assessment objectives as some boring rules you have to follow. They're not. They are the secret code. This is literally the examiner's checklist for giving you marks. If you can master what's on this list, you understand how to win. It's that simple.
And look, it's an equal three-way split, 10 marks for each objective. So for AO1, it's all about sharp, specific, and recent knowledge. Think treaties, conflicts, and events from the last 3 years. For AO2, you have to analyze the clash between different viewpoints, and this is so important, make a synoptic link. And finally, for AO3, you have to evaluate everything, weigh the arguments, and come to a really consistent, decisive judgment.
Let's just pause on that term for a second. Synoptic link. This is absolutely non-negotiable if you want a top grade. It means you have to connect the topic of your essay to another completely distinct area of the course. You can't just talk about human rights in a vacuum. You have to link it to, say, the power of state sovereignty.
And don't just take my word for it. This quote from the examiners shows you exactly what they mean. Don't just mention another topic. You have to show how one thing impacts the other. So, for example, explaining how that economic divide between the global North and South creates real, tangible barriers to achieving universal human rights. Now that's the depth they want to see.
Okay, so now we know what the examiners want. The next big question is, how do we give it to them? Well, this is your structural formula for every single paragraph you write. This takes all the guesswork out of building a really powerful argument. You've probably heard of Peel, but we're adding a crucial final step, judgment. You start with a clear point, ideally rooted in a political theory. You back it up with specific recent evidence. Then you explain exactly how that evidence proves your point. And then, and this is where the top marks are really won, you introduce a counterargument and make a mini judgment on which side is more persuasive, right there in the paragraph. Now here's the cool part. All those little mini judgments you make in each paragraph, they should all connect and point in the same direction. This creates what examiners call the golden thread. It's your core argument, your main thesis, that runs consistently from your introduction, weaves through every single paragraph, and leads all the way to your final conclusion. Just look at the difference here. I think realism is better is, well, it's just an opinion. It's weak. But saying why it's more persuasive, connecting it to a specific structural weakness in the UN, now that is a justified, evidence-based judgment. That's what you're aiming for every time. And hey, remember to flex your high-level vocabulary. Using terms like complex interdependence or supranationalism correctly shows the examiner you're not just repeating things you've read in the news. You're actually engaging with political theory on a deeper level, and that is essential for getting into those top mark bands. Okay, let's shift gears and get practical. You've got the knowledge, you've got the structure. Now you need a strategy for the moment that clock starts ticking, because believe me, in the pressure of an exam, time management is absolutely everything. You have to be strict with your time. The 2-essay strategy is vital. You give yourself about 42 minutes for each essay, no more. But before you even write a single word, you're going to spend the first 2.5 minutes just deconstructing the question and planning your answer. Trust me, this small investment up front pays off big time. So in those first 30 seconds, your only job is to understand the mission. What is the command word telling you to do? Is it evaluate, analyze, to what extent? And what is the specific argument you have to debate? You have to lock on to that target and never lose sight of it. Then, in your 2-minute plan, think thematically. Instead of just a simple for and against list, plan your paragraphs around bigger ideas like sovereignty or economic power.
And most importantly, decide on your synoptic hook right at the start. Where are you going to make that mandatory link to another part of the course? Figure it out before you start.
All right, finally, let's talk about defense, because knowing what not to do is just as important as knowing what to do. These are the most common pitfalls that stop students from reaching that top level 5 category.
These are the big 3. First, what I call knowledge dumping. That's just listing everything you know without actually linking it to the question. Second, forgetting to evaluate. You describe both sides of an argument but never actually say which one is stronger. And third, the real killer mistake, forgetting that synoptic link and treating the topic like it exists in its own little world.
This chart really says it all, doesn't it? The marks are split evenly. If you neglect your evaluation or you forget that synoptic analysis, you are basically throwing away a third of the marks for that question before you've even started. You have to perform well across all 3 areas. And this just brilliantly shows the path to the top. Look, just listing facts, that'll get you a low-level mark. Add in some decent analysis, and you're moving into the middle bands. But it's that final step, combining facts, analysis, evaluation, and those mandatory synoptic links that unlocks the door to level 5.
So, what's the big takeaway from all this? The blueprint for a top-grade essay is one that is anchored in political theory, it presents a balanced debate where you genuinely consider both sides, and it drives relentlessly towards a decisive, well-justified judgment. I know it might seem like a lot, but this is a clear, repeatable system. It's not about magic, it's all about method. You now have the blueprint. The only question left is, are you ready to start building?